Bear viewing. It's either your biggest dream or biggest fear. For most people around the world, it's a rare privilege, a mix between magic and fright. In the Yukon, it's a normal, nonetheless startling Saturday afternoon. Bears are everywhere, and nearly all tourists want to spot them. While many places with similar ecosystem have banked on wildlife viewing as a form of tourism, the territory actually doesn't really offer such adventures. But why not? People want to view wildlife, but there's also a huge economic opportunity in doing so. There's actually a study that came out in 2014 about ecotourism in British Columbia. It says there's more money to be made by looking at bears than by shooting at them, 12 times more to be exact, according to the Center for Responsible Tourism. Backcountry tourism, including bear viewing, brings around $2 billion each year for both Alaska and BC, the Yukon's neighbors. So why aren't we tapping into this? Our first stop to answer this question is the government. The Yukon's Department of Tourism and Culture says wildlife viewing is the territory's #1 activity. But when you look at how it promotes tourism, it's all about open space, rivers, and mountains.
I can understand why you might be curious about that. Wildlife viewing is complicated. For some people, of course, they see it as an economic opportunity, a way to make money, but also it is viewed by others as something that could be invasive and actually sort of harm the wildlife. In the Yukon, we definitely prioritize sustainable tourism development. There's demand for this type of experience, and there's a ton of demand for wilderness-based experiences.
So what would be the next step for me to be able to open and run that business in the Yukon?
So right now, there isn't a process or a way for a business to actually get land tenure unless you're a hunting outfitter or a trapper. Then you can get concessions and undertake that type of activity. But for the broader tourism sector, at this moment, there's not a place or a mechanism to enable that, but it is a work in progress right now.
Wait, that last bit of information is a bit puzzling. There's demand from tourists. Mining industry, hunting outfitters can obtain a license to operate, but when it comes to tourism, that type of license doesn't exist to develop out on the land. Marsh says it simply hasn't been a priority for the government. Here's one of the people that's been impacted by the lack of legislation around land and tourism.
Access to land is something that the Wilderness Tourism Association of the Yukon has been working on for probably 30 years now. We have members that have retired or sold their businesses. Sadly, we have some members that have passed away, waiting for an opportunity to have access to land.
Pallet spoke of some of the obstacles that make this a complicated subject, including the fact mining and hunting are deeply rooted in the Yukon's culture and priorities. But he says more access to the land for wildlife viewing doesn't have to mean less for these two sectors.
The land tenure piece is long and complicated, but we are a willing and engaged partner, and we definitely we definitely understand that having access to land would create new opportunities, both for existing operators and potentially for new companies as well.
One of the existing operators that he's talking about is Phil Timpany. Timpany has been advocating for more backcountry tourism for years. He's actually the only person that's allowed to do bear viewing here in the Yukon. How? It all boils down to land claims. In 1995, when Vuntut Gwitchin First Nation settled its land claims in Old Crow, they set aside parts of their land for the creation of a protected area and ecological reserve. One of the First Nation requirements in the management plan to include grizzly bear viewing for tourism opportunities. In the early 2000s, Timpany started to take tourists out to see bears at Bear Cave Mountain. This is his second bear viewing location south of Athlone, BC. And here, tucked into the forest with the Nakina River running through it, fear of the mystic grizzly makes room for curiosity.
I think the people that come here get to understand the nature of a bear. I think that people that don't participate in this kind of activity, they have their perception of the nature of grizzly bears is different than what it really is. Fear is running rampant in the Yukon. Fear of bears. fear of bears is, there's a paranoia. Most people, I ask most guests how their experience was before they leave, either the morning they leave or the evening before. I ask a lot of them, how did you find the experience? And the most common word they use about the experience with the bears and the encounters with the bears, they're very surprised at how calming it is to them.
Timpani says both locations are booked up to 3 years in advance. Tourists are willing to each pay $7,500 for 6 nights with the bears.
The Yukon has huge potential for wildlife viewing, commercial wildlife viewing, huge potential. It's a shame that there isn't more value on a grizzly bear's life than there is in Yukon. It's really a shame that there's so many bears killed. 1,000 years ago in Yukon, the bears knew as much about the people as the people knew about the bears. And that's what made it all work. And we've taken that away. We don't allow the bear to get to know us. And here we allow them to get to know us. They know we're not threatening. So you build tolerance, you build knowledge, and you build respect and appreciation.
There's a lot more that needs to be done before this would work on a bigger scale, and many more discussion to be had on how it would work in harmony with land claims, mining industries, and hunters. But Timpani's story shows that there's a glimmer of hope that what the Yukon's neighbors have tapped into one day here could also be a reality. After all, the Yukon is so vast and has so much to offer. Virginie Anne, CBC News, Whitehorse.
You can't stand up, Peter. You can't stand up. Sorry. Come on, I'm going.
Too many people?